Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. In this week's video I'm going to talk to you about unit testing in DBT. Testing in general, there's no getting away from it. If you want good code quality, you're going to have to implement testing. And one of the best features of DBT is to automate and embed testing within your data pipelines. And in this video I'm going to talk to you about how you automate unit testing within DBT and extend the functionality that comes out of the box with DBT using packages. We'll also touch upon briefly singular tests and generic tests, as well as looking at how we can generate documentation to share with your data consumers.
My name's Morton, and I've written a couple of books on Snowflake. I've also been lucky enough to speak in front of my peers on a number of occasions. I've lived and worked in the UK, Europe and Australia during my career, and today I'm on a mission to help as many people as I can fulfill their career potential by adding as much value as I can around data strategy and modern cloud data platforms. And in this video I'm going to talk to you about unit testing in DBT. Okay guys, so let's get into this demo using DBT on top of Snowflake to show you how to build a automated unit test framework. Now I'm going to take you through this example step by step, show you everything that I've done to get to the final kind of end state that I have here in this DBT project, and hopefully you can follow along yourself and it'll make sense to you. So first of all, in Snowflake I have this test framework database and I've got a source schema. Within that source schema, I've got 4 tables: customer, nation, orders, and region. And in here, you can see that in the customers table, I've got 10,000 records, nation 25, orders 10,000, and region 5. Now, what I want to do in my DBT model, I want to join these 4 tables together, apply some business logic, aggregations I've got in there as well, as you'll see in a second, and then produce an end result. If I jump into the DBT project and I just expand my models, in my customer data model here, you can see I'm using the 4 tables I've just shown you. I've specified them in the customer YAML file here. So sources, I've got a name and a description, and then a name for the particular tables within that source schema: customer, orders, region, nation. I've also named the model customer data, given it a description. We'll come on to the particular tests soon. And then I've also detailed out the columns with a description as well. I'll show you at the end of this, if you stay tuned, to how to produce the documentation and what that looks like, which is based upon these metadata descriptions. And again, when we get to the testing part of this video a little later, I'll show you where these singular tests come into play and how they can help you as well. So that's my YAML file that I specified. If I go back to my customer data model, I'm referencing the data in that YAML file, okay, so it knows where I'm sourcing the data from. Here's my basic select statement, which is joining those 4 tables together and applying some basic aggregations to produce a final result set called customer data effectively in Snowflake. At the moment, I've cleared that Snowflake environment down. So in the test framework database, you've just got the default information schema and public schema. And then in my source schema, which I showed you before, there's my tables. Now, the purpose of this is to show you how we can then apply a test to test that this business logic is working properly and we're getting the expected results that we anticipate based upon that business logic in the table. The first thing that I need to do is, if I was to run this model as is in DBT, if I show you this lineage graph, it's obviously just sourcing data from those 4 kind of real tables, if you like, that I want to base my development on. But now as a tester, I want to be able to provide some mock data sets for these 4 tables, run the model on that, and then produce a result, and then compare that result against a predefined expected result set that I've already put in place as well. Effectively, I want to test edge cases and I want to make sure that the business logic holds tight and it does what it's supposed to do based upon my requirements. So to provide that mock data to DBT, first of all, which is basically based upon these 4 tables here, I'm using seeds. Now, there's obviously a number of different ways that you can do that. The reason why I like to use seeds is it means that It's part of the DBT project, so it's encapsulated all within the DBT project, meaning that you're not required or relying on any additional prerequisites outside of the DBT project. You can automate everything end to end pretty easily, as I'll show you in a second. It also means that anybody can provide those mock data and expected result set, because you don't need any specialist knowledge like an understanding of SQL, for example. So business users can effectively provide mock data sets and an expected result set based upon what they want to see. So it does open the door to that as well. If I just quickly show you my seeds that I've got one seed for each of the tables in my source schema, and I'm just providing one record. You could obviously provide a lot more than that, but I'm providing one input record for each of the seeds for the purposes of this demo. Now, these are my mock data sets. So based upon that, I want to be able to feed these mock data sets into my customer data model when I'm running this in unit test mode, which we'll get to in a second what that looks like. And then I've got an expected customer data, expected result set, which is based upon these 4 input files. This is what I expect to see for my total number of orders. I've got 1 in there, my most recent order, and the total price of the orders. So fairly basic, but obviously I could have multiple records in each of these input tables, this mock data, and this would become a little bit more complicated. But the principles are always going to remain the same. So the first thing I want to do is I just want to load up these seeds and get them into my Snowflake environment first of all. That's probably the first step I want to do. So to do that, I'm just going to run a dbt seed command, hit return. That will pick up those 5 seeds. So there you go. dbt's picked up the 5 seeds. It's passed, all 5 are successfully passed. If I go back into Snowflake now, if I refresh this, now I've got this customer data testing schema which has been added. If I expand my tables, there's my 5 seed tables. Again, looking at the number of rows, I can see I've got the expected number of records, which is just 1 in each of those. If I go back into DBT and I go into my DBT project YAML file, you can see here, this is where I'm specifying the schema to do with the seeds, customer data testing. And you can also optionally specify column types for each of your tables in here. I could specify more than just the 1 here, but it's optional, and it's always good practice basically to specify data types for all of your seeds based upon CSVs, so you can ensure that when they're loaded into the database, you've got a strongly typed data set that you're aligning them to. Again, for the purposes of this demo, I've just given you an example. What I would recommend though in a production environment would be to list each of the columns for all of your seeds, not just input orders, and provide them with a data type that's relating to your target database, whether that be Snowflake or Redshift or BigQuery, depending on what you are using. So with that out of the way, then I've got my seeds, I've got my mock data in place. I've also got my source data in place. But now I need to be able to tell this model to either use the tables from the source schema, so the real data if you like, or to use my mock data. So how I'm going to do that, I've created a macro in here called select table, really basic as you can see. It takes 2 input values. One is the source table, so one is the actual real data in that source schema, and one is the test table, so the mock data, the seeds I've just loaded. And then basically I'm going to pass in a flag to DBT at runtime, a unit testing flag. If that unit testing flag is equal to true, then this macro will return the test table. Otherwise it will return the actual source table. So what I need to be able to do now is use that macro and leverage that macro when I run this customer data model. So to do that, let me just grab some code and copy and paste it in just for speed to show you what that looks like. So at the top of here, I'm setting these variables at the top for import customer, import orders, nation, region, so on. I'm calling the macro each time, passing through the real data and the seed, and then I'm using those variable values within the CTE The logic's exactly the same beneath that, no changes there. Watch what happens to the lineage when I click save now. It now shows everything on there, so it shows the 4 databases and the 4 input seed mock data tables as well. So at this stage, it knows that there's a relationship potentially against each of these. But at runtime, as you'll see in a second, when I pass through the flag, it will know what's happening. And it'll be able to dynamically switch between a unit testing mode using these mock data sets versus a standard running mode, which will be these data sets. Now, the important point to note here is we're testing business logic in a non-production environment. We're testing edge cases. We're making sure that that business logic meets the requirements. Once we're happy with that and we promote that into production environment, then we wouldn't expect that business logic to change unless it came back through that development lifecycle. So we'd only really want to test for these unit test cases and test that business logic in a non-production environment. What this means is encapsulating everything inside your project, both unit tests and a normal kind of production grade running pipeline. All you need to do is pass a different value to that unit test and flag in, and you don't need to worry about changing anything else. There's no other hard coding going on. There's nothing else. So you can literally just deploy this to your production environment and never run it in unit test mode. The beauty is this can build up over time, and in non-production environments, you can just easily pass your unit test and flag equal to true, run your DBT pipelines, and you've also got a regression test suite of everything that's part of your project that will be tested based upon all of these seeds, which will grow over time. So enough talking, let's get on and run this and see what happens. So I'm going to use a DBT run command. I'm specifying the model, which is option, customer data, and then this is the key bit. I'm passing in the variable value, unit testing, setting it to true. So I'm basically telling it to use the mock data sets. If I execute that, okay, so now I've executed the customer data model with the unit test and flag is equal to true. So instead of using the mock data, we can actually check that by looking into the logs. If we expand the logs in the details section for the model itself, we can then click details and we can scroll down and we can actually see and view the SQL that is executed on a Snowflake environment. And we can see here that it's actually using the input tables, the mock data tables, is part of the SQL it's generated. If I go into Snowflake then and hit refresh and expand our data out, we can go to customer data and I can see I've got one record in there, which is our one record that went through that customer data model transformation and produced an output. Now at this stage we haven't tested anything, we've literally just loaded our seeds, our mock data, and created the macro to be able to accept a flag and make a decision dynamically on what source data set to use. Now just to prove that it works both ways, let's go back into here and run it with the unit test and flag equal to false. So this time that will get passed through to the macro, and the macro will actually choose the real data, if you like, within the source schema. So this time we should expect a lot more records in that customer data table. We'll give it a second to run, and there we go. If we look at the details again and scroll down, now we can see that that input underscore is gone, and it's actually using the source dot orders, customer, region, and nation tables. If we go into Snowflake again and just hit refresh, and if we just select everything from this table, because often you'll find that this doesn't always, the metadata doesn't always refresh immediately for the number of rows. If we place that name in the editor and just select start from everything, you can see now we've got 641 records in that same table, and the only thing that we did was change the input flag, the unit testing flag, into DBT and executed that command again. Now this time, or the next steps, what we want to do is we want to be able to test this result set actually in the table against an expected result set that we've provided as that seed into DBT. So let's take a look at that next. So the first thing I want to point out when we talk about testing is if I just go back to the customer YAML file, I had one of these generic tests out of the box. There's not null, there's unique, there's accepted values, and there's relationships. And if you want to know more about what comes out of the box, then I'll put a link at the top of the screen now, so you can take a look at my previous video which talks through that. But I've just put this test in there just as an example, so you can see what happens when I run the test in. This is just checking that nation column. just for any nulls in there. We anticipate that the data should always have a value in there. There shouldn't be any nulls. So we've added that test in there, which will run. The next thing and the most important thing as part of this unit testing framework is we need to be able to test the expected results that we've provided into DBT. Essentially, this record here, this row here, against these mock data sets. So all 4 of these feed into the customer data model. The business logic is applied, and as an output that ends up in a table in Snowflake. We then want to compare that output to this expected result set, and then tell us if that's a pass or fail. Now, to do that, there's various packages that you can add into DBT and import them in that extend the out-of-the-box functionality for you from DBT itself. If I go into packages, I'm actually using this dbutils package from DBT Labs. Essentially, if you want to use any packages, you'll find them listed in here. In order to install it, then you add your line into that file, click save, and execute that command, which will go off and install the package against your DBT environment for your own user. That allows you then to call various functionality within that package. I've already installed this, so I'm not going to run it again, but I will show you where I'm using it. Right here at the model level for customer data, I'm calling a function within that dbutils package called equality. That basically will compare 2 models to see if they're exactly the same. I'll show you the SQL that's generated as part of this test when we do run it. And it's basically saying, check this model to see if it's like a model that we can provide it with. In this case, it's our expected results data set. So all we need to do is add these 2 lines and it'll generate a lot of SQL to compare each column. Optionally, you can specify the columns that you want to test to see if they're equal to each other. In this case, I'm not specifying that, so by default, it will check all of the columns. If we go back into to run our DBT process, and what we're going to do, we're just going to set it up again to run in the unit testing mode, first of all. So our unit testing flag is equal to true. We'll execute this again, and this will now contain just that single record that we've populated. So let's run our dbt test command now to execute all tests on that customer data model. If I hit return on here, then we're expecting 2 tests to run. One is the generic test, the check-in for uniqueness within the nation column, which is this one here. And the other one is the equality test across the entire tables, customer data and customer data expected. If I expand the not null test and go into details, you can see here the actual SQL that's executing. The way DBT works is if this query returns any values at all, that test will actually fail. So any tests that you write in DBT basically need to be written in a way that if you do see results that come back, then it will fail, otherwise it's a pass. If I look at the dbutils equality function that we ran, you can see the generation of the SQL under the covers, and you can see that it's comparing each column against each other, union the data set together, and then it'll provide a result set back to you if anything has actually failed. In this case, everything's passed, which is great. So we've proved our business logic works. So our inputted data has resulted in our expected result set. But just to go back one step and show you what happens and the behavior, if we run DBT again with the unit testing flag is equal to false, so we'll populate those 600 odd records into that target model, and then we'll run the test again to compare the expected results against the data that's actually in there. And this time it should fail that equality test because our one expected result of one record will not equate to the 649 records in our target table. So we will see one pass and one fail, which is exactly what we've got here. And if we expand this out, it tells us that it's failed. But how do we get our hands on anything in that result set at all? Well, by default, nothing is actually written to the database. But what you can do in the DBT project YAML file, you can add a couple of lines in here. I've got them commented out at the moment. So for tests, and don't forget anything that you put in a DBT project YAML file is project wide, so global setting. In this case, I'm telling it to store all failures equal to true. So if I just click save on that and execute the DBT test command again, we'll expect that test to fail. We'll give it a second to run. So there's 2 tests, one's passed, one's failed. I'll go back into Snowflake and refresh this. We've now got a new schema which has been created by default by simply commenting back in those lines around the capturing the test result details. If I expand this out, I have 2 tables, one for each test. They're not null at test passed, so I don't have any records in there, while the equality one, that actually failed. And here's my number of rows in total, which includes the 641 from the actual table itself, the model itself, plus the 1 expected results from my mock data set. It's put all that in there. If I just show you what that looks like very briefly. You can see which test everything's failed on. So we've got A minus B. So basically the actual outputted customer data model data set versus the reference data set. If I sort this the other way, there's my 1 record from my expected results set, which obviously doesn't appear in the customer data table. So by default, that's how easy it is to switch on and capture some results. Often you'll want to extend that to do more with that. Finally, I just want to go in and just show you the documentation as I promised earlier. So to generate the documentation, I run dbt docs generate. That's going to use all the metadata I showed you in the customer YAML file, as well as any of the documentation I've specified within my project. It's going to generate some documentation for all of the objects, and by default, all of those is passed. I'm going to get a little tooltip up here in a second. Here we go. Your docs are ready to view. If I click View Docs, I can then expand what I've got in here. I then got my list of columns and my customer data model. I've got a description, which I've provided. Again, this documentation is only going to be as good or as rich as the metadata that you've added into your DBT project. But the big advantage is you add it in one place, it's stored behind the scenes in version control, and it can be leveraged then to produce documentation. Notice as well that it'll specify any tests from the generic tests out of the box. So I've got an N for not null here. Really handy for users just to see what tests are against that. If I go into lineage, again, I can see the lineage diagrams as well. At the moment, it's context sensitive. So if I'm in the customer data table, it will just show me the lineage for that. If I've got more than one model in there and I'm looking at this lineage at a project level, it will show me all of the lineage as well. So I can expand this out, make it bigger. I can also apply various filters to this to make it easier to navigate if you've got a large model, which is often the case in a production environment. So that's it. We've went through DBT on Snowflake, how to set up a unit testing framework, how to dynamically switch between real tables and mock tables, and then to use some packages to compare expected results, as well as producing the documentation to look at the lineage. I really hope that you found that useful. If you did, please like and subscribe. New videos coming very soon.
I also wanted to let you know about our Mastering Snowflake program with myself that we run, and it's an exclusive signature program to help you master Snowflake and learn how to design, implement, and scale solutions in the cloud. And I've designed this program specifically for those people who have either scratched the surface using Snowflake or who are stuck working with legacy on-premise technologies and haven't been invested in by their companies and have fallen behind in their career. And what I've done is packaged up my knowledge and experience of working with Snowflake since 2017 and learning how to package up Snowflake's out-of-the-box capabilities in a way where you can apply them in the real world to address common challenges. So this program isn't about theory. Of course, I need to introduce you to the concepts if you're new to Snowflake, and many of my members are, but it's really about introducing the theory and then in practice how you apply those in the real world. I've been through the pain of understanding what works and what doesn't. Now I've got a formula or a set of recipes, if you like, that show you how to do that. So the Mastering Snowflake program includes in-depth, on-demand video course content that I've created,
They all include practical hands-on demos. I provide access to all the code, templates, and files that I use as part of those demos, so you can download them and use them freely. You may want to use them in your day-to-day work. You may want to take them and customize them and use them as a starting point. All members on the program get exclusive access to a members-only group where everybody can help each other out and share their knowledge and best practice and get expert advice. Finally, I also carry out a group 60-minute coaching call with all the members, totally optional, where you can ask me anything about Snowflake, data analytics, data strategy, data architecture, you name it, interview advice, and I can help you and give my input and help and support and guidance around that. Finally, you'll get lifetime access to all feature updates. Snowflake's changing and evolving. There's new features and releases every week, and you'll continue to benefit from those updates as well. At a high level, there's 10 modules. This is what we cover, everything ranging from the Snowflake architecture to getting data into Snowflake. And then once you've got data, how do you effectively use it, secure it, share it, and work with it to ensure that you get the maximum value from your Snowflake implementation. If you're interested, I've included the application link in the video description below. If this sounds like the thing that you're looking for and you want to supercharge your career, and if you're ready to take the ultimate step, I'd really encourage you to fill out the application form below.